ELENA VASQUEZ never imagined that $50 at a dusty county auction would change her life forever. Desperate to start over after losing her job and apartment, she bid on what looked like a worthless storage shed, hoping to flip it for quick cash. The rusty padlock gave way easily enough, but what she found inside made her blood run cold. Stacks of leather-bound ledgers filled with names, dates, and dollar amounts. Wooden crates containing cash bundles wrapped in plastic. Photographs of men in expensive suits, shaking hands with politicians she recognized from the evening news. And in the center of it all, a brass nameplate that made her heart stop. Vincent The Wolf Torrino, 1962-2018. Every person in the city knew that name. The most feared crime boss in decades, supposedly dead and buried. But if he was really gone, why did she feel like someone was watching her right now? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 weeks earlier, ELENA had sat in the unemployment office clutching her final termination paperwork from Meridian Insurance, where she'd worked as a claims adjuster for 8 years. The corporate restructuring had eliminated her position, along with 47 others. At 34, she found herself competing with college graduates who would work for half her previous salary. The eviction notice arrived the same day. Her unemployment benefits were denied due to a bureaucratic error that would take months to resolve. ELENA's savings account held exactly $312. Her sister Maria offered a couch in her cramped apartment. But ELENA's pride wouldn't let her burden her younger sibling, who was already struggling to support 2 kids on a teacher's salary. That's when she spotted the newspaper advertisement for the county auction. Estate and abandoned property sale, tools, furniture, buildings. The building section caught her attention. Maybe she could buy something cheap, clean it up, and resell it quickly. The auction took place on a gray Saturday morning at the county fairgrounds. ELENA arrived early, clutching her auction paddle and a thermos of coffee that would serve as breakfast and lunch. The crowd consisted mostly of contractors looking for equipment, antique dealers hunting for treasures, and curious locals drawn by the promise of bargains. The auctioneer, a weathered man named Chuck Henley, worked through household items and farm equipment with practiced efficiency. ELENA waited through 3 hours of bidding before they reached the building section. Most properties drew serious attention from real estate investors and developers. But when they announced Lot 847, a storage shed in an industrial area, the crowd's interest noticeably waned. 10 by 12 storage building, concrete pad included, Henley announced. Located on Warehouse Row, needs some work. Do I hear $50? ELENA raised her paddle without fully understanding why. The location sounded rough, but any building had to be worth more than $50. A few other half-hearted bids pushed the price to $48 before ELENA won with her final bid of $50. Harold Jenkins, the auction house clerk, processed her paperwork with bored efficiency. His thick fingers pecked at an ancient calculator as he filled out forms in triplicate carbon copies. Lot 847, $50 plus $5 processing fee, he said without looking up. You got the keys, the deed, and whatever's inside. Sold as is, no warranties. What's the neighborhood like? ELENA asked, suddenly wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. Industrial area, mostly warehouses and storage facilities. Not much foot traffic. Building's been sitting empty for about 6 years since the owner died. ELENA signed the papers and received a manila envelope containing a rusted key, a property deed, and a hand-drawn map showing the shed's location. Walking to her aging Honda Civic, she felt the first stirrings of doubt. $55 represented a significant portion of her remaining money. Warehouse Row proved to be a depressing stretch of industrial buildings separated by cracked parking lots and struggling weeds. Most structures showed signs of vacancy or minimal use. ELENA's shed sat at the end of a row, slightly isolated from its neighbors. The building itself looked even more run down than she'd expected. Gray metal siding bore rust stains and dents. The roof seemed intact but needed cleaning. Weeds grew up around the concrete pad, and someone had dumped an old tire nearby. Elena parked and approached the shed with growing pessimism. The padlock looked ancient, its surface green with corrosion. She tried the key, expecting resistance, but the mechanism turned surprisingly easily. As she pushed open the metal door, hinges squeaking in protest, Elena prepared herself for disappointment. Empty sheds were common at auctions. She'd probably bought $55 worth of storage space that might rent for $30 a month if she could find tenants in this forsaken area. Instead, she stepped into what looked like an abandoned office. File cabinets lined one wall. A desk sat in the corner, its surface covered with papers and photographs. Wooden crates were stacked along the back wall. And there, prominently displayed on the desk, sat a brass nameplate that would change everything. The nameplate gleamed despite the shed's dusty interior, as if someone had polished it recently. Elena picked it up with trembling fingers, reading the engraved words that sent ice through her veins. Vincent The Wolf Torrino, 1962-2018. Elena's hands shook as she set down the nameplate. Vincent The Wolf Torrino had dominated local news for 3 decades before his apparent death 6 years ago. Even people who avoided crime stories knew his reputation: ruthless, intelligent, and untouchable, until federal prosecutors finally built a case that sent him into hiding. She opened the first file cabinet drawer, revealing rows of leather-bound ledgers organized by year. The earliest dated back to 1987, when Torrino would have been 25 years old. Elena pulled out a random volume from 1995 and opened it to pages covered in meticulous handwriting. The entries read like a businessman's journal, but the business was clearly illegal. March 15th, J. Rodriguez, dock supervisor, $2,000 monthly. Container inspections. March 22, city planning debt. Building permits expedited, $5,000. April 8th, Judge Morrison, case number 94-7738, dismissed, $15,000. Elena recognized several names from the current city government. Judge Morrison still presided over the county courthouse. The dock supervisor notation suggested port corruption that probably continued today. Each entry included precise amounts, dates, and services rendered. She pulled another ledger from 1992. This one contained more disturbing entries. Tommy M. collection problem. Resolved, 500 bonus. Warehouse, 7. Merchandise relocated after. Inspection warning, $2,000 cleanup. The euphemisms barely concealed their violent implications. A blood stain on one page made Elena's stomach lurch. The entry beside it read, "Negotiation with Castellano family concluded successfully. New territory boundaries established." The date was October 1992. Elena remembered news stories about a mob war. During that period that left 8 people dead, she photographed several pages with her phone before moving to another cabinet. This one contained more recent records, ending in 2018, the year of Torrino's supposed death. The final entries showed a different pattern: legitimate businesses, charitable donations, and what appeared to be efforts to distance himself from criminal activities. January 2018, St. Mary's Children's Hospital, $50,000. Donation, February 2018, Riverside Community Center renovation, $25,000. These entries seemed genuinely philanthropic, lacking the transactional language of the earlier criminal activities. The desk drawers yielded more revelations. Photographs showed Torrino with mayors, police chiefs, and federal judges at various social functions. Some images were clearly surveillance photos, taken without the subject's knowledge. Others appeared to be social occasions where cooperation was being celebrated. One photograph stopped Elena cold. It showed current Mayor Richardson shaking hands with Torrino outside City Hall. The timestamp indicated December 2017, just months before Torrino's alleged death. Richardson had built his political career on promises to clean up municipal corruption. Elena's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Elena Vasquez." The voice was gravelly, older, with a slight accent she couldn't place. Yes? You need to forget what you found today. Put everything back exactly as it was and walk away. Who is this? Someone trying to keep you alive. That building has been watched for 6 years. We know you were there today, and we know what you saw. The line went dead. Elena's blood turned to ice water. She looked around the shed with new awareness, noticing details she'd missed before. The interior was too clean for an abandoned building. The ledgers showed no dust, despite 6 years of supposed vacancy. Someone had been maintaining this place. She grabbed the ledger with the most damaging entries and several of the most incriminating photographs. As she prepared to leave, Elena noticed a loose board in the back wall. Behind it, she found a small metal box containing a key and a handwritten note, for insurance purposes only. Box 2847. First National Bank. Elena pocketed the key and note, then carefully arranged everything else to look undisturbed. As she locked the shed and walked to her car, she felt eyes watching from multiple directions. A dark sedan was parked 2 blocks away that hadn't been there when she arrived. Driving home, Elena checked her mirrors constantly. The sedan didn't follow her directly, but she spotted similar vehicles at 2 different intersections. Professional surveillance, not amateur stalking. At her apartment, Elena spread the stolen documents across her kitchen table. The ledger entries painted a picture of systematic corruption involving dozens of officials who still held positions of power. These records could destroy careers, topple administrations, and potentially solve unsolved crimes dating back decades, but they could also get her killed. Elena spent a sleepless night checking locks and peering through curtains. Every car engine, every footstep in the hallway made her heart race. By morning, paranoia felt like a living thing crawling under her skin. She left for a coffee shop downtown, taking a circuitous route through residential neighborhoods. The dark sedan from yesterday was gone, but a blue SUV maintained distance behind her for 6 blocks before turning away. Professional watchers knew how to rotate surveillance vehicles. At Grind Coffee, Elena chose a corner table with clear views of both entrances. She opened her laptop and began researching Vincent Torrino's history, cross-referencing news articles with the ledger entries she'd photographed. The timeline of his criminal empire matched perfectly with documented police corruption scandals and unexplained case dismissals. A man in his 50s approached her table, moving with the careful precision of someone accustomed to danger. His jacket was expensive but conservative, and his eyes constantly scanned the room. "Miss Vasquez. I'm Detective Marco Santos, City Police. Mind if I sit?" Elena's pulse spiked, but Santos didn't seem threatening. His badge looked genuine, and his manner was more protective than aggressive. "What can I do for you, Detective?" "You can stay alive by listening carefully. Yesterday, you visited a storage facility on Warehouse Row. Today, you're researching Vincent Torrino. Those 2 facts together make you very dangerous to some very powerful people." "I don't know what you're talking about." Santos smiled grimly. "I've been investigating Torrino's network for 8 years. I know that building has been under surveillance since his death. I also know you removed something yesterday because our mutual friends are suddenly very interested in your activities." Elena studied his face, looking for signs of deception. Santos seemed genuinely concerned rather than threatening. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I'm one of the few cops in this city who wasn't in Torrino's pocket. My partner died investigating his organization in 2016. Officially, it was a car accident. Unofficially, his brake lines were cut." Santos leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Elena, those ledgers contain evidence that could bring down half the city government. But they also contain information that certain people will kill to protect. You're not equipped for this game. What do you suggest I do?" "Give me whatever you took. Let me handle it through proper channels." Elena laughed bitterly. "Proper channels?" "According to these records, there are no proper channels. Judges, prosecutors, police captains, they're all compromised. Not all of us. Enough of you." Santos sat back, recognizing her distrust. "Then at least be smart about it. Assume your phone is monitored. Assume your apartment is being watched. Don't trust anyone except family, and maybe not even them if the pressure gets high enough. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Check your apartment. We left something for you. Santos saw her expression change. What is it? Elena showed him the message. Santos cursed under his breath. We need to go. Now. They left the coffee shop together, Santos walking close enough to shield her from potential threats. His hand rested near his weapon, and his eyes never stopped moving. My car's around the corner, he said. We'll drive past your building first, check for unusual activity. Elena's apartment complex looked normal from the street, but Santos parked 2 blocks away. Stay here. I'll check it out. I'm not letting you go alone. Elena, this isn't a democracy. You're a civilian who stumbled into a war zone. Let the professional handle it. Santos disappeared around the building's corner. Elena waited in the car, watching pedestrians and traffic for signs of surveillance. After 20 minutes, her phone rang. Your apartment's been searched, Santos said. Professionally done, very clean. But they left something on your kitchen table you need to see. Elena met him at her building's side entrance. They climbed to her 3rd-floor apartment, where Santos had already swept for listening devices and cameras. On her kitchen table sat a manila envelope containing photographs of her sister Maria and her 2 children walking to school. The images were taken that morning, showing the children's faces clearly. A handwritten note accompanied the photos. Beautiful family. Be a shame if something happened to them. Elena's knees went weak. These people weren't just threatening her anymore. They were threatening innocent children to ensure her silence. Santos examined the photographs with professional detachment. High-quality surveillance work. They wanted you to know they can reach your family any time they choose. Elena sank into a chair, suddenly understanding the true scope of her danger. This wasn't about money or property. It was about secrets powerful enough to destroy lives, careers, and possibly entire criminal organizations. She'd stumbled into something far beyond her ability to control. Detective, what exactly did Vincent Torrino do that makes people this desperate to keep it secret? Detective Santos was examining the photographs when Elena's doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw a man in his 30s wearing an expensive suit and carrying himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Anthony Torrino, he said when she opened the door. Vincent was my father. Elena stepped back, her hand moving instinctively toward the kitchen where Santos waited. But Anthony raised his hands peacefully. I'm not here to threaten you, Ms. Vasquez. I need your help as much as you need mine. Santos appeared in the doorway, his hand resting on his weapon. Anthony Torrino, thought you'd left town after your father died. Detective Santos. Still playing the honest cop, I see. Anthony's tone carried no malice, just weary recognition. I did leave. Moved to Seattle, started a legitimate business, tried to build a normal life. But my father's death brought me back. Elena studied Vincent's son, looking for family resemblance. Anthony was tall and lean, where his father had been stocky and powerful. His eyes held intelligence, but lacked the cold calculation she'd expected from Torrino offspring. Why should we trust you? Elena asked. Because I'm the only person who can tell you what those ledgers really mean. And because I have something my father left for you. Anthony reached into his jacket slowly, producing a sealed envelope. Elena's name was written on the outside in careful handwriting. My father was dying of cancer in 2018. The doctors gave him 6 months. He spent that time trying to clean up his affairs and protect the people who might get hurt when his organization collapsed. Elena opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery. Miss Vasquez, if you are reading this, then fate has chosen you to inherit my greatest burden. The ledgers contain 30 years of evidence against corrupt officials who helped build my empire. I kept these records as insurance, never intending them to survive me. But my death was not natural, and my killers will stop at nothing to retrieve these documents. The safe deposit box key will lead you to resources you'll need to survive what's coming. Trust my son, Anthony. but trust no one else completely. The wolf may be dead, but his pack still hunts. Vincent Torrino. Elena looked up at Anthony. Your father was murdered. Poisoned by someone in his inner circle. The official cause was heart failure, but he'd been getting stronger with treatment. Someone wanted him dead before he could finish cleaning house. Santos holstered his weapon and sat down. Who had access to him during his final weeks? 3 people, Tommy Marcelli, his longtime enforcer, Sophia, his second wife, and his lawyer, Gerald Steinberg. All of them had reasons to want him dead. Anthony pulled out his own chair and sat across from Eleanor. My father and I had been estranged for 15 years. I wanted nothing to do with his world. But 3 days before he died, he called me. Said he'd made provisions to protect innocent people who might get caught in the aftermath. What kind of provisions? $2 million in clean money, plus documentation that would expose his killers. He hid everything and left clues for whoever found the shed. He never expected it to be someone like you. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Why me? Why not give this to law enforcement? Santos answered before Anthony could respond. Because law enforcement can't be trusted. Half the cops, prosecutors, and judges in this city are compromised. Your father was smart enough to know that. Anthony nodded grimly. He said the only way to ensure justice was to find someone outside the system. Someone with nothing to lose and everything to gain by exposing the truth. Elena thought about her unemployment, her eviction, her desperate financial situation. Vincent Torrino had somehow predicted that only someone with no stake in the current system would be willing to risk everything. To change it, what about the people threatening my family? Tommy Marcelli's crew? They've been waiting 6 years for someone to claim that shed. They probably have orders to eliminate anyone who finds the evidence. Elena stood and walked to her window, looking down at the street where surveillance vehicles might be waiting. So my choices are die quietly or die fighting. Anthony joined her at the window. There's a third option. We expose everyone simultaneously, create so much chaos that no one knows who to eliminate first. But it requires using my father's methods. What methods? Fighting fire with fire, using their own corruption against them. Becoming the predator instead of the prey. Elena looked at Vincent's letter again, understanding its true message. Her desperate bid for $50 at a county auction had made her heir to a criminal empire's secrets and the terrible responsibility that came with them. The next morning, Elena's doorbell rang at precisely 9 o'clock. Through the peephole, she saw 2 men in dark suits who carried themselves with the practiced authority of government officials. Ms. Vasquez, we're representatives of Mayor Richardson. He'd like to speak with you about a matter of mutual interest. Elena opened the door cautiously. The larger man, who introduced himself as Deputy Chief of Staff Michael Barnes, handed her an embossed business card. The mayor is prepared to offer you a very generous consulting contract, Barnes said smoothly. Historical research into city development patterns. $50,000 for 6 months of work. Elena knew exactly what they were buying. That's very generous for research that doesn't exist. The mayor values thorough historical documentation. He's particularly interested in ensuring that certain outdated records don't create unnecessary confusion about past administration policies. The second man remained silent, but watchful. His jacket slightly bulged where a shoulder holster would rest. Elena understood she was being offered a choice between wealth and continued breathing. I'll need to think about it. Of course. But the mayor hopes you'll consider how much your family's security means to you. These are dangerous times for people who dig too deeply into historical matters. After they left, Elena called the number Anthony had given her. They met at a diner in the industrial district, far from downtown surveillance networks. Richardson made contact, Elena said, sliding into a booth across from him. 50,000 to forget what I found. My father predicted this. Richardson's been mayor for 12 years, built his career on reform promises. If those ledgers become public, he's finished. Elena stirred her coffee absently. What exactly do the ledgers say about him? Anthony pulled out his phone and showed her photographs he'd taken from other sources. Richardson took money from my father's organization from 2009 to 2017. Development permits, zoning changes, police assignment adjustments. He wasn't a casual participant. He was a full partner. Then why did Vincent stop paying him? Because my father was trying to go legitimate. Richardson wanted to maintain the old arrangement, but Dad was cutting ties with political corruption. That's part of why he was killed. Elena studied the photographs showing Mayor Richardson accepting briefcases of cash from Vincent Torrino. The images were taken at various locations over several years, suggesting systematic documentation of their relationship. Who took these pictures? FBI surveillance. There's been a federal investigation into municipal corruption for 5 years. They've been building cases but moving slowly because so many officials are involved. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coffee shop on 5th Street. Come alone. Agent Walsh. She showed the message to Anthony, who frowned. Karen Walsh, FBI. She's been investigating my father's network since 2019. Supposedly clean, but in this city, you never know. Should I meet with her? Probably. But be careful what you reveal. Federal agents have their own agendas. Elena left Anthony at the diner and walked to the coffee shop. Agent Karen Walsh was a woman in her 40s with graying hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much corruption to maintain idealism. Ms. Vasquez, thank you for coming. I assume you know why we're meeting, because I stumbled into something bigger than I can handle, because you have evidence that could complete a 5-year federal investigation into municipal corruption. Evidence that could bring down a criminal network my partner died trying to expose. Walsh opened a briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. We know about the shed, the ledgers, and Vincent Torrino's insurance policy. We also know that Tommy Marcelli's crew is planning to eliminate you within the next 48 hours. Eleanor's blood chilled. How do you know that? Because we have surveillance on all the major players. Marcelli held a meeting last night. You were the primary topic of discussion. Walsh spread photographs across the table, showing various men in expensive suits gathered around a restaurant table. Elena recognized Tommy Marcelli from news photos, a heavy-set man with dead eyes and scarred hands. We can offer you protection through the witness security program. New identity, relocation, federal marshals ensuring your safety. In exchange, you testify about what you found and help us build cases against the corrupt officials. Elena studied the photos of men who wanted her dead. What about my family? Your sister and her children would be relocated with you. New lives, new identities, complete protection, and I disappear forever. Never see my home again, never use my real name. The alternative is dying in the next 2 days. Elena looked out the coffee shop window at the city she'd called home her entire life. Witness protection meant abandoning everything familiar, everyone she cared about, for the slim chance that federal prosecutors could successfully bring down a corruption network that had operated for decades. I need time to decide. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, we can't guarantee your safety. Eleanor met Anthony at the storage shed that evening, armed with Vincent's final letter and the mysterious safe deposit box key. The industrial area was deserted after business hours, creating an atmosphere of isolation that made every shadow potentially dangerous. We need to move fast, Anthony said, checking the street for surveillance vehicles. Agent Walsh is right about Tommy's timeline. My sources confirm he's planning something for tomorrow night. Elena unlocked the shed and stepped inside, this time accompanied by someone who understood its true significance. Anthony moved through the space with familiarity and touching items that held personal meaning. My father spent more time here than at home during his final months, he said, running his fingers along the desk edge. This was his real office, where he planned his exit from the criminal world. Anthony knelt beside the desk and pressed something underneath. A panel slid open, revealing a hidden compartment containing additional documents and a small recorder. He left instructions for finding his emergency resources. Everything he accumulated for the people who would inherit his war. Elena examined the recorder, a digital device that looked expensive and professional. "What's on here?" His confession. Names, dates, methods, everything federal prosecutors would need to dismantle his entire network, including the people who killed him. They drove to First National Bank, arriving just before closing time. Elena presented the safe deposit box key to a security guard, who looked like he'd seen everything and been surprised by none of it. Box 2847 was larger than Elena had expected, roughly the size of a briefcase. Inside, she found bundles of cash totaling approximately $50,000, along with jewelry, gold coins, and several manila envelopes marked with different years. "Insurance policies," Anthony explained, examining the envelopes. "My father documented every major crime his organization committed, along with evidence proving which officials helped cover them up. One envelope contained photographs of diamond smuggling operations at the port. Another held bank records showing money laundering through legitimate businesses. The third envelope made Elena's hands shake, detailed documentation of 3 murders, complete with witness statements and physical evidence that had never reached police files. Why would he keep evidence that could destroy him? Because in his world, information equals survival. These records guaranteed that no one could betray him without destroying themselves. Elena found a 4th envelope marked Current Operations 2018 inside. Were documents showing that Vincent's criminal empire hadn't died with him. Tommy Marcelli had assumed control and expanded operations into human trafficking and drug distribution. "Tommy's been using my father's name and reputation to build his own organization," Anthony said, studying surveillance photos of shipping containers at the port. "But he's sloppy where Dad was careful, violent where Dad was strategic." Elena discovered a USB drive taped to the bottom of the box. When she connected it to Anthony's laptop, it revealed digital copies of everything in the ledgers, plus video recordings of meetings between Vincent and various officials. One video showed Mayor Richardson accepting a briefcase of cash in exchange for approving a waterfront development project that served as a money laundering front. The footage was date-stamped and professionally shot, leaving no room for denial. My father was building a case against everyone who'd helped him, Anthony realized. He planned to bring down his entire network as his final act, but someone killed him before he could finish, which means we have to finish it for him. Elena stared at the wealth of evidence spread before them. These documents could destroy dozens of careers, topple city government, and expose criminal operations that probably continued today. But using them meant accepting Vincent Torrino's final mission and all the danger that came with it. "Anthony, if we do this, there's no going back. We become targets for everyone whose crimes are documented here. We're already targets. The difference is whether we die as victims or as people who fought back." Elena thought about her sister's children threatened by men who killed without conscience, about Detective Santos, whose partner had died investigating this same network, about Agent Walsh, whose years of work could finally bring justice if Elena found the courage to help. "What did your father mean about having resources to survive what's coming?" Anthony smiled grimly and pointed to another section of the box Elena hadn't noticed. Inside were business cards, contact information, and coded notes representing a network of informants, allies, and people who owed Vincent Torrino favors. Dad didn't just document corruption. He built relationships with people throughout the system who could help or hurt his enemies. Police officers who stayed honest, prosecutors who couldn't be bought, federal agents who wanted justice more than career advancement. Elena realized she wasn't inheriting just evidence of criminal activity. She was inheriting Vincent Torrino's entire intelligence network and the power to use it against his enemies. Agent Walsh called Elena at 6 in the morning, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to meet immediately. Something's happened that changes everything." They met at a different location. This time, a parking garage downtown where Walsh's vehicle was. equipped with electronic countermeasures to prevent eavesdropping. 3 hours ago, we intercepted communications indicating that Tommy Marcelli has moved up his timeline, Walsh said without preamble. He's planning to eliminate you today, not tomorrow. Elena felt her stomach drop. Why the change? Because someone told him you've been meeting with federal agents. He knows his window for containing this situation is closing rapidly. Walsh opened a briefcase and pulled out a small metal object about the size of a matchbook. Vincent Torrino's FBI informant badge. He was working with us for the final 6 months of his life. Elena stared at the badge, understanding flooding through her. He wasn't trying to go legitimate. He was building a federal case. Exactly. Your boyfriend Anthony doesn't know this, but his father was preparing to testify against his entire organization in exchange for immunity and protection for family members. Then why was he killed? Because someone in the FBI leaked information about his cooperation. Vincent discovered the leak and was preparing to expose it when he was murdered. Walsh's revelation hit Elena like a physical blow. Vincent Torrino hadn't been seeking redemption. He'd been playing a deeper game, using federal cooperation as cover for documenting evidence that would destroy both his criminal empire and the corrupt officials who'd enabled it. Who was the leak? We're not certain, but we have suspects. The point is, Elena, you can't trust anyone completely. Not Anthony, not Detective Santos, not even other federal agents. Elena thought about Anthony's apparent honesty, his willingness to help expose his father's killers. What makes you think Anthony doesn't know? Because if he knew his father was cooperating with federal agents, he would never have involved you. He would have come directly to us with the evidence. Walsh pulled out surveillance photographs showing Elena and Anthony at various locations over the past 2 days. We've been monitoring your activities. Anthony's clean as far as we can determine, but he's operating on incomplete information about his father's final months. So, what do you want from me? Complete cooperation, full access to everything Vincent left behind. In exchange, we'll provide protection for you and your family, plus financial compensation for your assistance. Elena studied Walsh's face, looking for signs of deception. Federal agents were trained liars when necessary, and Elena had no way to verify anything Walsh claimed. How do I know you're not the leak Vincent discovered? Walsh smiled grimly. Because if I were, you'd already be dead. The leak wanted Vincent eliminated before he could testify. I want his killers brought to justice. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Anthony. Emergency. Meet at the warehouse. Come alone. Walsh saw Elena's expression change. What is it? Elena showed her the message. Walsh immediately reached for her radio to call for backup units. Don't, Elena said quickly. If Anthony's in trouble, federal agents showing up will only make things worse. Elena, this could be a trap. Tommy Marcelli might be using Anthony as bait, or Anthony might genuinely need help, and federal intervention will get him killed. Walsh studied Elena carefully. You're starting to think like Vincent Torrino. Suspicious of everyone, trusting no one completely, always considering multiple possibilities. Maybe that's what it takes to survive in his world. His world got him killed. Elena pocketed her phone and opened the car door. I'm going to help Anthony. You can follow at a distance if you want, but I won't lead federal agents directly to him. Elena, wait! Walsh grabbed her arm. There's something else you need to know about Vincent's cooperation with us. He wasn't just documenting corruption. He was identifying targets for elimination. What do you mean? Vincent provided us with a list of people he considered threats to national security. People whose criminal activities had grown beyond local corruption into international terrorism and human trafficking. Tommy Marcelli was at the top of that list. Elena understood the implication. Vincent Torrino hadn't just been seeking immunity for himself. He'd been orchestrating the systematic destruction of criminal networks that had grown beyond his ability to control. You're telling me Vincent was working with federal agents to eliminate his own people? I'm telling you that your $50 shed purchase made you heir to a federal operation that's been 5 years in the making. An operation that won't succeed unless you help us complete Vincent's final mission. The warehouse Anthony had mentioned was located in the same industrial district as the storage shed, a sprawling complex of connected buildings that had once housed a shipping company. Elena arrived to find Anthony's car parked behind the main structure, but no sign of him anywhere. She called his phone and heard it ringing from inside the building. The front door was unlocked, which immediately set off alarm bells in her increasingly paranoid mind. Elena pushed the door open cautiously, her hand clutching the small canister of pepper spray she'd bought that morning. "Anthony?" She called into the echoing space. "Over here," his voice came from the back of the warehouse. "I found something you need to see." Elena made her way through stacks of abandoned equipment and shipping containers, following the sound of Anthony's voice deeper into the building. The space smelled of rust, motor oil, and something else she couldn't identify, something organic and unpleasant. She found Anthony standing before a wall covered with architectural drawings and security plans. The blueprints showed detailed layouts of a large compound with multiple buildings, guard towers, and what appeared to be underground tunnels. "This is my father's old estate," Anthony said without turning around. "The family compound where he lived until 2015. Elena studied the hand-drawn security plans, noting entrances, camera positions, and patrol routes marked in different colored inks. Someone had updated these plans recently, with new notations dated just weeks before Vincent's death. "Why are these here?" "Because this warehouse belonged to my father. He used it as a secondary office when he was planning the final phase of his operation." Anthony pulled down one section of blueprints, revealing a hidden wall safe behind them. The combination lock looked new, professionally installed within the past few years. "The combination is my birth date," Anthony said, working the lock. "Dad always said family was the only thing worth protecting." Inside the safe, Elena found video recording equipment, surveillance devices, and dozens of labeled USB drives. One drive was marked Insurance Policy Final Version. Another read Sophia, October 2018. "Your stepmother, my father's second wife. She married him in 2010, 5 years after my mother died. Beautiful, intelligent, and completely ruthless." Anthony connected the USB drive, marked with Sophia's name, to a laptop he'd brought. The screen filled with video footage from what appeared to be a hidden camera in Vincent's bedroom. The footage showed Sophia Torrino, a striking woman in her 40s, methodically searching through Vincent's personal papers while he slept. She photographed documents with a small camera, copied files from his computer, and made phone calls in whispered Italian. She was spying on him, Elena realized, for 3 years according to the timestamps. Dad suspected her but kept collecting evidence instead of confronting her directly. The next video showed Sophia meeting with Tommy Marcelli in a restaurant, handing him a manila envelope while discussing something intensely. The date stamp indicated this meeting occurred 2 weeks before Vincent's death. She was working with Tommy. "To eliminate your father." Anthony's face had gone pale with suppressed rage. Dad trusted her completely, let her handle his personal finances, gave her access to family accounts, even consulted her on business decisions. Elena watched more footage showing Sophia's methodical betrayal of her husband. The woman had been playing a long game, positioning herself to inherit Vincent's empire while eliminating the man who'd built it. "There's something else," Anthony said, connecting another drive to the laptop. This footage showed Sophia in Vincent's kitchen, carefully measuring white powder into his morning coffee. The timestamp was 3 days before his official death from heart failure. Poison? Digitalis, probably. Causes heart arrhythmia that mimics natural cardiac arrest. Untraceable unless you know what to look for. Elena felt sick watching Vincent Torrino's murder unfold in silent surveillance footage. The man had documented his own death, creating evidence that his killers never suspected existed. Why didn't he stop her? Because he was building a case that would destroy everyone who betrayed him. Dad didn't just want to survive. He wanted to ensure that his enemies couldn't hurt anyone else. Anthony disconnected the laptop and gathered the USB drives. Sophia inherited control of Dad's legitimate businesses when he died. She's been using them to launder money for Tommy's expanded operations. Where is she now? Living in Dad's compound, playing the grieving widow while running a criminal empire. But she doesn't know these recordings exist. Elena realized they now possessed evidence of first-degree murder committed by people who thought themselves untouchable. But possessing evidence and using it safely were entirely different challenges. Anthony, if we expose this, Sophia and Tommy will know the recordings exist. They'll do anything to retrieve them. They're already planning to kill us. The difference is whether we die as victims or as people who brought his murderers to justice. Eleanor looked around the warehouse, understanding that this place represented Vincent Torrino's final gambit, a carefully planned revelation that would expose his killers and destroy the corruption network that had enabled his empire. Elena and Anthony were preparing to leave the warehouse when they heard vehicles approaching outside. Through a grimy window, Elena counted 4 black SUVs positioning themselves to block all exits from the building. Tommy's people, Anthony whispered, quickly gathering the USB drives and laptop. They must have been monitoring the warehouse. Elena felt her blood turn to ice as armed men emerged from the vehicles. These weren't the professional but restrained federal agents she'd encountered. These men moved with the predatory efficiency of people accustomed to violence. Is there another way out? Anthony led her toward the back of the warehouse, where a loading dock provided access to the rear parking area. But as they approached, Elena saw more vehicles arriving to surround the building completely. "We're trapped," Anthony said, his voice tight with controlled fear. Elena's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. She answered it despite Anthony's warning gesture. Elena Vasquez. The voice was cultured with a slight accent that suggested European origins. "This is Sophia Torrino. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't know what you're talking about. Vincent's insurance policies. The recordings he made without my knowledge. The evidence he foolishly collected instead of living peacefully in retirement." Elena looked at Anthony, who nodded grimly. Sophia's call confirmed their worst fears about the surveillance footage. "What do you want?" "Simple exchange. You and Anthony walk out of that warehouse. Give me everything Vincent left behind, and everyone lives peacefully. Refuse, and my associates will ensure this conversation is our last." Elena could see Tommy Marcelli through the window, a heavy-set man with dead eyes who gestured impatiently at his subordinates. "These weren't people who made empty threats. I need time to consider your offer. You have 5 minutes. After that, we come inside." The line went dead. Elena turned to Anthony, whose face had gone pale with suppressed rage and fear. "She killed my father, and now she wants to eliminate the evidence." "Anthony, maybe we should consider her offer. We could give her the recordings and disappear." "You don't understand. Sophia doesn't make deals. She eliminates problems. If we give her those recordings, we'll be dead within hours." Elena studied the warehouse interior, looking for defensive positions or alternative escape routes. The space was filled with abandoned equipment and shipping containers that could provide temporary cover, but no real protection against determined attackers. "Then we need to find another option." Anthony opened his laptop and inserted one of the USB drives. "My father included more than just surveillance footage. He documented escape routes, safe houses, and emergency contacts throughout the city. The screen displayed a map showing various locations marked with different symbols. Some were marked as safe haven, others as resources, and a few bore the ominous designation last resort. What's a last resort location? Places where Dad stockpiled weapons, communication equipment, and resources for surviving extended conflict. He prepared for the possibility that his entire organization might turn against him. Elena realized that Vincent Torrino had been planning for this exact scenario. Betrayal by his closest associates and the need to fight back from a position of extreme disadvantage. "There's a tunnel system under this warehouse," Anthony said, pointing to architectural drawings on the laptop screen. "Dad had it built in 2016 as an emergency escape route. It connects to the storm drain system." Elena could hear voices outside as Tommy's men prepared to breach the building. Time was running out for any chance of peaceful resolution. Even if we escape, Sophia knows we have the evidence. She'll never stop hunting us, unless we make the evidence public before she can stop us. Anthony connected a different USB drive to the laptop, revealing a contact list that included reporters, federal agents, and what appeared to be international law enforcement officials. Dad created a dead man's switch. If he disappeared or died suspiciously, this information would automatically be released to multiple agencies simultaneously. But he's been dead for 6 years. Why hasn't it been triggered? Because I was supposed to trigger it. But I left town and tried to forget about his world. I abandoned the responsibility he left me. Elena understood the weight of guilt Anthony carried. His father had prepared contingencies for exposing his killers, but Anthony's desire to escape the criminal world had prevented justice from being served. It's not too late. If we trigger the dead man's switch now, everyone whose crimes are documented will know exactly who exposed them. We'll have targets on our backs forever. Elena heard the warehouse door being forced open. Tommy's men were inside the building, beginning their systematic search. We're out of time, Anthony. Either we fight back now, or we die as victims. Anthony led Elena to a section of the warehouse floor where concrete panels concealed the entrance to Vincent's escape tunnel. They could hear Tommy's men methodically searching the building, their voices growing closer with each passing minute. The tunnel connects to 3 different exit points, Anthony whispered, prying up a concealed panel with a crowbar he'd found among the equipment. But once we're down there, we're committed to whatever comes next. Elena helped him lift the heavy concrete slab, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The tunnel below looked professionally constructed, with concrete walls and battery-powered emergency lighting. Your father really prepared for war. He understood that in his world, today's ally becomes tomorrow's enemy. Survival meant always having an escape plan. They descended into the tunnel system, Anthony carrying the laptop and USB drives, while Elena clutched Vincent's emergency contact list. Behind them, they could hear Tommy's men discovering the open panel. "They're in the tunnels!" someone shouted. "Get the dogs." Elena and Anthony ran through the narrow passageway, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. The tunnel was surprisingly extensive, with branch passages leading in different directions and emergency supply caches built into alcoves. "This way," Anthony said, choosing a passage that sloped upward towards street level. "This exit comes out near the harbor, in an area Dad controlled for 30 years. As they climbed toward the surface, Elena's phone began receiving messages from multiple sources. Agent Walsh was trying to coordinate federal response. Detective Santos was warning about increased police surveillance. Most ominously, there were automated messages from Vincent's dead man's switch system. "Anthony, your father's emergency protocols are activating. Someone's been monitoring our communications." Anthony checked his own phone, finding similar messages. The system was designed to trigger if multiple threat indicators occurred simultaneously. "Our current situation meets all the criteria." They emerged through a disguised exit into an alley behind a fish processing plant. The harbor was visible 2 blocks away, with fishing boats and commercial vessels creating a maze of potential hiding places. "We need to reach the safe house before Sophia's people track us down," Anthony said, consulting a map on his phone. "Dad maintained 3 locations in this area where we can regroup and plan our next move." Elena realized that Vincent Torrino's emergency network was more extensive than she'd imagined. Even 6 years after his death, his preparations were protecting people who fought against his killers. They moved through back alleys and side streets, avoiding main roads where surveillance cameras might track their movements. Elena felt herself adapting to the paranoid mindset required for survival in Vincent's world, checking reflections in windows, noting escape routes, assuming every stranger might be a threat. "There," Anthony pointed to a modest apartment building overlooking the harbor. "3rd floor, corner unit. Dad's been paying rent through an automated system since 2015. The safe house was furnished with basic necessities, but equipped like a command center. Multiple phones, radio equipment, weapons, and communication devices filled one room. Another contained surveillance monitors showing feeds from cameras throughout the harbor district. Jesus, Elena whispered, realizing the scope of Vincent's intelligence network. He was watching everything. Anthony activated the communication systems and began contacting people from his father's emergency list. Elena listened as he spoke in coded language with individuals who'd been waiting 6 years for activation orders. "The Wolf's Den is compromised," Anthony said into a secure phone. "Initiating Protocol 7. All assets converge on Harbor Station." Elena watched the surveillance monitors as people began moving throughout the waterfront area. Shop owners closed early and left their businesses. Fishing boats altered course toward predetermined positions. A network that had remained dormant since Vincent's death was awakening. Who are these people? Dad's insurance policy. People he helped over the years who owed him favors. Small business owners he protected from extortion. Fishermen whose boats he helped finance, dock workers whose families he assisted during hard times. Elena realized that Vincent Torrino had built loyalty through more than fear and money. He'd created genuine relationships with working people who remembered his assistance during difficult periods. They're not criminals. Most of them are completely legitimate. But they understood that Dad's protection came with potential obligations. When he died, they thought those obligations died with him. Anthony's phone rang with an incoming call from Agent Walsh. He answered on speaker so Elena could participate in the conversation. "Mr. Torrino, federal agents are prepared to provide immediate extraction for you and Ms. Vasquez. Our surveillance indicates Tommy Marcelli's people are mobilizing for a major operation against you." "What kind of operation?" "Complete elimination of all witnesses and evidence. Sophia Torrino has decided that negotiation is too risky. She's ordered the systematic murder of everyone who knows about Vincent's recordings." Elena felt the weight of that decision. Not just her life, but Anthony's, Detective Santos's, and potentially Agent Walsh's were now at risk because they knew the truth about Vincent's murder. Agent Walsh's extraction offer came with conditions that made Elena's blood run cold. "You'll need to surrender all evidence to federal custody and enter witness protection immediately. No contact with family, no return to your previous life, no independent action against the targets." Elena looked at Anthony, who was monitoring surveillance feeds showing Tommy's men systematically searching the harbor district. "What about stopping Sophia and Tommy?" "Federal prosecution will handle that through proper channels. It could take months or years to build solid cases, but justice will be served eventually." "Meanwhile, how many more people die?" Elena asked. "Detective Santos, the people on Vincent's contact list, anyone else who gets in their way." Agent Walsh's voice carried the weight of bureaucratic limitation. "Ms. Vasquez, I understand your frustration, but vigilante justice isn't the answer. Let trained professionals handle this situation." Anthony disconnected the call and turned to Elena. "The federal approach means Sophia and Tommy consolidate power while prosecutors build cases that corrupt judges will dismiss on technicalities." Elena studied the surveillance monitors, watching Vincent's network of allies move into position throughout the waterfront. These weren't professional criminals. They were ordinary people who'd benefited from Vincent's protection and were now willing to risk everything to honor their obligations. "There has to be another way." Anthony connected a different USB drive to the communication system, revealing what Vincent had labeled his insurance policy final version. The screen filled with contact information for international reporters, foreign intelligence agencies, and offshore banking officials. Dad didn't trust American law enforcement completely. He prepared contingencies for exposing corruption through international channels that couldn't be suppressed by local officials. Elena realized that Vincent Torrino had been thinking beyond simple survival. He'd planned to destroy the entire corruption network by making exposure inevitable through multiple independent sources. How does it work? Simultaneous release to 57 different agencies and media outlets worldwide. FBI, CIA, Interpol, major newspapers, television networks, and banking regulators. Even if some sources are compromised, enough remain independent to ensure the information becomes public. Elena's phone buzzed with a message from Detective Santos. Tommy's people just raided my apartment. They're eliminating everyone who might testify. You need to act fast. Anthony was already preparing the final upload sequence when another message arrived, this one from an unknown number. Elena, this is your sister Maria. They have me and the kids. Call Sophia immediately or we die. Elena's hands shook as she stared at the message. The photograph attached showed Maria and her 2 children bound and gagged in what appeared to be a warehouse basement. The timestamp indicated the picture had been taken 20 minutes ago. They took my family. Anthony paused in his preparations, understanding the impossible choice Elena faced. It's a trap. If you contact Sophia, you'll be trading your life for theirs. If I don't, they'll kill innocent children. Elena called the number Sophia had used earlier. The woman answered on the first ring, her voice carrying cold satisfaction. I was wondering when you'd see reason. Elena, your family is safe for the moment, but their continued well-being depends entirely on your cooperation. What do you want? Everything Vincent left behind. The recordings, the financial records, the contact lists, and most importantly, the dead man's switch protocols that could destroy my business interests. Elena looked at Anthony, who was shaking his head desperately. She understood his position, surrendering. Vincent's evidence would not only ensure their deaths, but also allow Vincent's killers to escape justice permanently. Need proof that my family's alive. Of course, Sophia's phone transmitted video footage showing Maria and the children in what appeared to be reasonable health, but clearly terrified. They're being treated well, but Tommy grows impatient with extended negotiations. Elena could hear Tommy Marcelli's voice in the background, speaking in rapid Italian about schedules and permanent solutions. She didn't need translation to understand the implications. Where do you want to meet? Vincent's compound. The place where this all began. Come alone, bring everything, and your family goes free. How do I know you'll honor the agreement? Sophia laughed, a sound devoid of genuine humor. Because killing children brings unwanted attention. I prefer clean business solutions that don't complicate my operations. Elena understood that Sophia was lying. Once she had Vincent's evidence, there would be no reason to leave witnesses alive. But she also knew that refusing to cooperate would guarantee her family's death. Anthony grabbed her arm as she prepared to leave. Elena, there's still another option. We can upload everything now, expose Sophia's crimes publicly, and force law enforcement to act immediately. While my sister's children die because I chose justice over family, while you ensure that Sophia never threatens anyone else's family again. Elena stared at Vincent's hit list displayed on the laptop screen, a document that chilled her blood with its clinical precision. Names, addresses, daily routines, and personal vulnerabilities were catalogued for 24 individuals Vincent had considered threats to his operation or obstacles to his final plans. Tommy Marcelli's entry was particularly detailed. Violent, impulsive, relies on intimidation over strategy. Weakness, gambling addiction, owes $200,000 to Atlantic City casinos. Frequents Rosetti's restaurant every Tuesday. Sits facing entrance. Leaves through kitchen exit. Security detail reduced after 10 p.m. Your father planned to eliminate all these people. Anthony studied the list with growing understanding. Not eliminate, neutralize. Dad understood that some problems couldn't be solved through negotiation or legal channels. Elena found Sophia's entry further down the list. Intelligent, manipulative, underestimates opponents she considers beneath her social class. Weakness, vanity, requires constant validation. Meets personal trainer at private gym Thursday morning, 6 a.m., minimal security present. He knew she was planning to betray him. He knew everyone was eventually going to betray him. That's why he documented everything and prepared countermeasures. Elena realized that Vincent Torrino's final months hadn't been about seeking redemption or going legitimate. He'd been orchestrating the systematic destruction of everyone who threatened his family's future safety. Anthony, this isn't just evidence of corruption. This is a battle plan. Anthony connected another USB drive, revealing detailed surveillance footage of Tommy's current operations. The recording showed drug shipments arriving at the port, human trafficking through legitimate shipping companies, and money laundering through restaurants and construction businesses. Dad continued gathering intelligence even after he started cooperating with federal agents. He was building cases against everyone simultaneously. Elena watched footage of Tommy Marcelli meeting with corrupt port officials, arranging for containers to bypass inspection in exchange for cash payments. The video quality was professional, suggesting Vincent had maintained extensive surveillance networks even while dying of cancer. How recent is this? Some of it's from last week. Dad's surveillance systems continued operating automatically after his death. Motion sensors, voice activation, scheduled recordings, everything designed to document ongoing criminal activity. Elena understood that Vincent had created a living archive of evidence that would continue growing even after his murder. His killers had inherited his criminal empire without realizing they'd also inherited his documentation systems. Tommy and Sophia don't know. They're being recorded. They know about the ledgers and the old evidence. They don't know about the automated systems Dad installed in their personal spaces. Anthony showed Elena surveillance footage from inside Sophia's compound, cameras hidden in rooms where she conducted business and held meetings with Tommy and other associates. The conversations were damning, casual discussions of murder, extortion, and various criminal enterprises. She killed your father to steal his empire, but she's been under surveillance the entire time. Dad's final joke on the people who betrayed him. Elena's phone buzzed with another message from Maria's captors. This time the photograph showed her sister looking more frightened, with visible bruises on her face. "They're getting impatient," Elena said, her resolve hardening. "But maybe we can use Vincent's intelligence against them." Anthony pulled up building plans for the compound where Sophia wanted to meet. The blueprints showed not only the current layout, but also modifications Vincent had made over the years: hidden passages, concealed observation points, and emergency systems that might still be operational. The compound has blind spots in the security coverage. Dad deliberately created them as escape routes and defensive positions. Elena studied the plans, understanding that Vincent had designed his home as both fortress and trap. Anyone who controlled the compound's hidden systems would have significant advantages over attackers or unwelcome guests. Can you still access those systems? Maybe, if Dad didn't change the codes after Sophia moved in. Elena realized they had an opportunity to turn Sophia's trap into their own tactical advantage. But it would require accepting Vincent's methods completely, using deception, manipulation, and violence to achieve their goals. "Anthony, if we do this, we become like your father. We use his techniques against people who deserve them, but we still become predators. The alternative is letting Tommy and Sophia kill your family and continue building their empire on other people's deaths." Elena looked at the surveillance footage showing Sophia calmly discussing the murder of potential witnesses as if planning a dinner party. This woman had poisoned her husband, kidnapped innocent children, and ordered the deaths of anyone who threatened her power. How long would it take to upload Vincent's dead man switch evidence? 20 minutes for complete transmission to all 57 targets. Elena made her decision with the cold calculation she was learning from Vincent's example. "Then we give ourselves 20 minutes to rescue my family and eliminate the people who killed your father." Anthony opened a secure metal case that Vincent had hidden beneath the safe house floorboards, revealing the Torrino family signet ring alongside detailed instructions for accessing his emergency network. The ring bore an engraved wolf's head surrounded by Italian script that translated to "loyalty above all." This ring grants authority over Dad's remaining loyal followers, Anthony explained, sliding it onto Elena's finger, but wearing it means accepting complete responsibility for their safety and their actions. Elena felt the weight of the gold ring, understanding its symbolic importance in Vincent's world. This wasn't just jewelry. It was a badge of leadership that carried life and death responsibilities. How many people are we talking about? 37 individuals who've been waiting 6 years for activation orders. Dock workers, fishermen, small business owners, and a few people with more specialized skills. Anthony showed Elena a roster of names with brief descriptions of each person's capabilities. Most were ordinary working people, but several entries caught her attention. Romano, explosives expert, construction background. Chen, electronics surveillance, former military. Patricia Walsh, federal agent, provisional ally. Agent Walsh is on your father's contact list. Dad recruited allies throughout law enforcement over the years. People who wanted to fight corruption but couldn't. Act alone within compromised systems. Elena realized that Vincent Torrino had been building a shadow organization, dedicated to fighting the very corruption his criminal empire had helped create. His final plan involved using both sides of his legacy simultaneously. Anthony, your father wasn't just seeking revenge. He was building a revolution. The surveillance monitors showed increased activity throughout the harbor district as Vincent's network responded to activation signals. Elena watched legitimate business owners closing their establishments and moving toward predetermined positions with the coordination of a military operation. They've been planning this for 6 years. Dad believed his death was inevitable once he started cooperating with federal agents. These people have been prepared to complete his mission if something happened to him. Elena's phone rang with a call from Detective Santos, his voice tight with urgency. Elena, Tommy's people just hit 3 more locations connected to your investigation. They're eliminating witnesses faster than we can protect them. Where's Agent Walsh? Missing. Her last check-in was 2 hours ago. We have to assume she's been compromised. Elena looked at the roster showing Patricia Walsh as a provisional ally, wondering if Vincent's intelligence network had been more extensively compromised than they'd realized. Detective, we need your help with something that's going to sound completely insane. Try me. Elena explained their plan to rescue Maria's family while simultaneously exposing all of Vincent's evidence through international channels. Santos listened without interruption before responding with grim approval. It's suicide, but it might work. What do you need from me? Coordinate with legitimate law enforcement for the aftermath. When Vincent's evidence goes public, there's going to be chaos throughout city government. Someone needs to maintain order and protect witnesses. Anthony was monitoring communications from Vincent's network, coordinating their movements through encrypted channels that Tommy's people couldn't intercept. Elena watched the precision of their organization, understanding why Vincent Torrino had remained untouchable for so many years. Final positions in 15 minutes, Anthony reported. Everyone's ready for simultaneous action. Elena studied the compound blueprints one more time, memorizing the locations of hidden passages and emergency systems that might provide tactical advantages. The building's design reflected Vincent's paranoid genius: multiple escape routes, concealed observation points, and defensive positions that could turn any assault into a costly mistake. What about the dead man's switch upload? Initiated. All 57 agencies will receive complete evidence packages in 18 minutes. After that, there's no stopping the exposure. Elena felt the weight of Vincent's ring and the responsibility it represented. In less than 20 minutes, she would either rescue her family and bring justice to Vincent's killers, or die in the attempt. But either way, the truth about corruption in the city would become public knowledge that couldn't be suppressed. Anthony, if we don't survive this, will Vincent's people continue the fight? They've been waiting 6 years to honor their obligations to my father. Success or failure tonight, they'll ensure that Tommy and Sophia face justice. Elena realized that Vincent Torrino's final plan was bigger than any individual's survival. He'd created a system that would achieve his goals, regardless of who lived or died in the immediate conflict. Then we're not just fighting for my family. We're fighting for everyone who's suffered under this corrupt system. Anthony checked his weapons and communication equipment, preparing for the assault on Sophia's compound. Dad always said the only way to defeat predators was to become a better predator. Tonight, we find out if he was right. The Torrino compound loomed against the evening sky like a fortress, its high walls and surveillance towers designed to project power and intimidate visitors. Elena approached the main gate alone, carrying a briefcase containing duplicate copies of Vincent's evidence while the real files uploaded automatically to 57 international agencies. Tommy Marcelli waited in the courtyard with 6 armed men, his dead, eyes reflecting the arrogance of someone accustomed to intimidating victims into submission. Sophia stood beside him wearing an elegant black dress, as if Vincent's murder and the kidnapping of innocent children were social occasions requiring appropriate attire. "Ms. Vasquez," Sophia said with false warmth, "thank you for seeing reason. Your family's safety depends entirely on your complete cooperation." Elena set down the briefcase, but didn't open it. "I want to see Maria and the children first." "Of course." Sophia gestured toward a side building where Elena could see figures moving behind barred windows. "They're unharmed, though understandably frightened by their situation." Tommy stepped forward, his scarred hands reaching for the briefcase. "Let's get this over with." "I don't like extended negotiations." "Neither do I," Elena replied, pressing a concealed button on Vincent's ring. The compound's hidden surveillance systems, dormant since Vincent's death, suddenly activated throughout the property. Speakers crackled to life with Vincent Torrino's recorded voice, delivering a message he'd prepared for this exact scenario. "If you're hearing this, then my killers have been stupid enough to bring my enemies into my home. Sophia, Tommy, you poisoned me thinking that would end my influence. You were wrong." Sophia's face went white with shock as Vincent's voice filled the courtyard from speakers she'd forgotten existed. Tommy spun around, looking for threats that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Elena Vasquez, by wearing my ring and activating these systems, you've accepted leadership of my network and responsibility for completing my final mission. The compound's defensive systems are now under your control." Elena felt a surge of power as hidden mechanisms throughout the property responded to her commands. Vincent had designed his home as both sanctuary and trap, with systems that could be turned against unwelcome guests. "What the hell is happening?" Tommy demanded, drawing his weapon and pointing it at Elena. "Vincent's final lesson," Elena replied calmly. "He taught you to be predators, but he never taught you to be prey." The courtyard lights suddenly shut off, plunging the area into darkness, broken only by emergency illumination from hidden sources that revealed Elena's position while concealing the locations of Vincent's people moving through the shadows. Anthony's voice came through Elena's earpiece. "Compound secure. Your family's safe. Tommy's men are neutralized." Elena smiled at Sophia and Tommy, who were now surrounded by figures emerging from concealment points throughout the property. Vincent's loyal followers had used the compound's hidden passages to position themselves for simultaneous action. "Sophia, you made 2 critical mistakes," Elena said, her voice carrying the authority Vincent's ring had granted her. "First, you assumed that killing Vincent would eliminate his influence. Second, you brought his enemies into a place designed to destroy them." Tommy raised his weapon toward Elena, but froze when red laser dots appeared on his chest from multiple directions. Vincent's people were positioned throughout the compound with clear fields of fire. "Federal agents are 5 minutes away," Elena continued. "But that's enough time for Vincent's final testament to be played." The speakers crackled again with Vincent's voice. But this time, he was reading from a prepared confession detailing every crime Sophia and Tommy had committed, including his own murder. The recording included dates, locations, and evidence that would be corroborated by the automated surveillance systems still operating throughout their businesses. Vincent recorded everything. Elena explained as Sophia's composure cracked completely. Your meetings, your crimes, your plans to expand his empire through human trafficking and drug distribution. All of it documented and uploaded to international law enforcement agencies 20 minutes ago. Tommy's weapon wavered as he realized the scope of Vincent's posthumous revenge. You're bluffing. The old man's been dead for 6 years. His surveillance systems weren't, Anthony said, stepping into the light with a laptop displaying real-time footage from cameras hidden in Tommy's restaurants and warehouses. Every crime you've committed since his death has been recorded and catalogued. Elena watched Sophia's face transform from arrogant confidence to desperate fear as she understood that Vincent Torrino had orchestrated her destruction from beyond the grave. The woman who'd poisoned her husband for power had discovered that his final gift to her was justice served cold. Vincent always said that in his world, today's ally becomes tomorrow's enemy, Elena said quietly. But he also believed that some enemies deserve to be destroyed completely, the sound of approaching. Sirens filled the night air as legitimate law enforcement arrived to collect evidence that could no longer be suppressed or dismissed. The federal agents who arrived at the compound weren't the corrupt officials. Vincent's ledgers had documented. Agent Walsh had survived her disappearance and coordinated with untainted law enforcement agencies to ensure that evidence collection couldn't be compromised or suppressed. Elena sat in the compound's main office, still wearing Vincent's ring, as she provided testimony to federal investigators who struggled to comprehend the scope of the corruption network they were dismantling. The automated evidence uploads had triggered simultaneous investigations by 17 different agencies, making suppression impossible. Ms. Vasquez, Agent Walsh said, reviewing preliminary reports on her tablet. Vincent Torrino's dead man switch has provided evidence for 43 federal indictments and complete restructuring of municipal government. This is the largest corruption case in the state's history. Elena felt emotionally drained after the night's confrontation. Maria and her children were safe, receiving medical attention for their ordeal, but physically unharmed. Tommy Marcelli was in federal custody, facing charges that would ensure life imprisonment. Sophia Torrino had been found dead in her cell 3 hours after arrest, apparently from the same digitalis poison she'd used to kill her husband. What happens to Vincent's network now? Officially, they're being treated as cooperating witnesses rather than criminal conspirators. Your decision to expose the evidence publicly instead of using it for personal gain has provided legal protection for everyone involved. Anthony sat across from Elena, having provided his own testimony about his father's final months and the systematic documentation of criminal activities. His relationship with Vincent had been complicated, but witnessing justice for his father's murder had brought a measure of peace. The FBI is offering you a position as a consultant on organized crime investigations, Agent Walsh continued. Your understanding of Vincent's methods and contacts could help dismantle similar networks in other cities. Elena considered the offer, while looking around the office where Vincent Torrino had planned his final victory over corruption. The federal witness protection documents on the table represented safety and anonymity, but also the complete abandonment of her identity and community. What about the people who helped us? The dock workers, fishermen, and small business owners who risked everything? Most will return to their normal lives. A few with more specialized skills might be recruited for federal operations, but only if they're interested in continuing this type of work. Elena realized she faced the same choice Vincent had confronted in his final months: retreat into safety or continue fighting corruption from within the system. The difference was that she now had legitimate authority and resources to pursue justice through proper channels. Agent Walsh, I need to ask you something directly. Were you really on Vincent's contact list, or was that information Anthony provided to gain our trust? Walsh smiled grimly and pulled out her own federal identification, revealing a note in Vincent's handwriting tucked behind her photo. Vincent recruited me in 2017 after my partner was killed investigating his organization. He convinced me that the only way to fight systemic corruption was from both inside and outside the system. Simultaneously, Elena understood that Vincent's network had been more extensive and legitimate than she'd realized. His final plan hadn't been criminal revenge. It had been a comprehensive strategy to expose corruption through multiple independent channels that couldn't be compromised. How many other federal agents were working with him? 17 across 6 different agencies. We've been coordinating for 5 years, waiting for evidence sufficient to justify comprehensive action against the entire network. Elena looked at the witness protection documents again, understanding that accepting them would mean abandoning the community where Vincent's influence could still be used for positive change. The compound, the businesses, and the network of loyal contacts represented power that could be redirected toward legitimate purposes. "I want to stay," Elena said finally, "but I want guarantees that Vincent's people won't face prosecution for their assistance." "Agreed. What about Anthony?" Anthony had been quiet during most of the debriefing, processing the complexity of his father's legacy and his own role in bringing justice to Vincent's killers. "I'm staying too. Someone needs to ensure that Dad's legitimate businesses are run ethically, and his resources are used to help the community instead of exploit it." Agent Walsh nodded approvingly. "Vincent would be proud of both of you." His final message specifically mentioned hoping that his legacy would be transformed from criminal empire to community asset. Elena realized that Vincent Torrino's greatest victory wasn't destroying his enemies. It was ensuring that his resources and influence would survive him to serve legitimate purposes. The man who'd built his power through corruption had died working to eliminate that same corruption from his community. 6 months after the compound confrontation, Elena stood in the renovated offices of Torrino Community Development, reviewing quarterly reports that documented legitimate business operations, funded by assets recovered from Vincent's criminal enterprise. The ledger she maintained bore no resemblance to the blood-stained records that had started her journey. "Harbor Youth Center construction is ahead of schedule," Anthony reported from his desk across the room. "The fishing cooperative has enrolled 47 new members, and the small business loan program has helped 12 families open legitimate enterprises." Elena examined the financial records with satisfaction. $2 million in recovered criminal assets had been converted into community investment, providing jobs and opportunities in the waterfront district that had once served primarily as cover for illegal operations. Detective Santos visited their office regularly, coordinating with Elena on cases where Vincent's old intelligence networks could assist legitimate law enforcement. The information systems that had once documented corruption now helped identify and prosecute new criminal activities before they could establish roots in the community. "Elena, we've got a situation developing at the port," Santos said, entering with a folder of surveillance photographs. "New players moving in, trying to establish drug distribution through the shipping companies." Elena studied the photos, recognizing patterns that Vincent's training had taught her to identify. Same methods Tommy used, different faces. "They're assuming Vincent's network died with him. What do you recommend?" Elena opened a secure file cabinet and pulled out contact information for dock workers, port officials, and federal agents who remained part of Vincent's transformed network. "We document everything, coordinate with legitimate authorities, and ensure these people understand that this community is under protection." Anthony looked up from his computer where he was reviewing applications for the community college scholarship program they'd established with Vincent's legitimate business profits. Dad would appreciate the irony. His criminal empire became the funding source for the exact opposite of what he originally built. Elena wore Vincent's ring daily now, but its meaning had evolved from symbol of criminal authority to representation of community responsibility. The dock workers and small business owners who'd once served Vincent's illegal interests now participated in legitimate economic development that benefited everyone. Any word from Agent Walsh about the federal investigation progress? 41 of the 43 indictments have resulted in convictions, Santos reported. The municipal government restructuring is complete, and the new mayor is actually clean as far as we can determine. Elena reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that $50 bid at the county auction. She now managed a multi-million-dollar community development operation, coordinated with federal law enforcement on organized crime cases, and carried responsibility for the welfare of dozens of families who depended on the legitimate enterprises they'd built from Vincent's legacy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just walked away after finding that first ledger, Elena mused. Tommy and Sophia would still be running their operations, Anthony replied. My father's killers would never have faced justice. Your sister's family would probably be dead, along with Detective Santos and Agent Walsh. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a message from Maria, who had recovered completely from her kidnapping ordeal and returned to teaching with renewed appreciation for her sister's courage. The children still had nightmares occasionally, but therapy was helping them process the trauma. Maria wants to know if you're coming to dinner Sunday. Tell her yes, and that I'm bringing the quarterly reports from the Education Fund. Her school's getting the new computer lab they requested. Elena had discovered that legitimate power, while more complex and slower moving than criminal authority, provided deeper satisfaction than Vincent's methods ever could have offered. The community respect she'd earned through honest service meant more than the fear Vincent had commanded through violence. Anthony closed his laptop and prepared to leave for the day. Elena, do you ever regret staying instead of taking the federal protection offer? Elena looked around their office, decorated with photographs of community projects they'd funded and testimonial letters from families they'd helped. Through the window, she could see the harbor where fishing boats operated profitably without paying protection money, and where legitimate businesses thrived without criminal interference. Never. Vincent spent 30 years taking from this community. We're spending the rest of our lives giving back. Elena locked Vincent's original ledger in the office safe, its blood-stained pages serving as a reminder of the cost of corruption and the value of choosing justice over personal safety. Tomorrow, she would continue the work of transforming a criminal legacy into community asset, one legitimate project at a time. 2 years after her $50 purchase at the county auction, Elena stood on the harbor pier, watching fishing boats return from their morning runs. The waterfront bustled with legitimate commerce, no longer a front for criminal operations, but a genuine economic engine supporting hundreds of families. Her business card, crisp and professional, read ELENA VASQUEZ, Community Development Director. The title represented a transformation she could never have imagined when desperation drove her to bid on a worthless storage shed. Anthony joined her on the pier, carrying coffee and the morning newspaper. The front page featured a story about the Harbor Youth Center's first graduating class, 12 young people who'd completed trade certification programs funded by the Torrino Foundation. Dad would be amazed, Anthony said, settling beside her on a wooden bench Vincent had probably used for planning criminal activities decades earlier. His money financing honest work instead of funding corruption. Elena sipped her coffee and watched children playing on the playground they'd built where a money laundering front had once operated. The transformation hadn't been easy. Some community members remained suspicious of anything connected to the Torrino name, while others struggled to adapt to legitimate business practices after years of operating in Vincent's grey economy. Detective Santos called this morning, Elena said. The new trafficking organization we've been tracking tried to establish operations at Warehouse 12, past tense. The dock workers' union convinced them to find alternative venues. Politely but firmly, Anthony smiled at the euphemism. Vincent's old network had evolved into something resembling a neighborhood watch program with unusually effective methods and federal law enforcement connections. Elena's phone displayed a message from Agent Walsh, now promoted to supervise organized crime investigations throughout New England. The federal task force continued dismantling corruption networks using techniques Vincent had pioneered: patience, systematic documentation, and coordinated exposure through multiple channels. "The FBI wants our help with the situation in Boston," Elena said, reading Walsh's message. "Similar patterns to what Tommy was running here, but the local network is more sophisticated. Are you interested?" Elena considered the offer while watching harbor seals sun themselves on the floating docks. 2 years ago, she'd been unemployed and facing eviction. Today, she was being recruited by federal agencies to help fight organized crime throughout the region. What do you think Vincent would say? That power without responsibility is corruption, but responsibility without power is helplessness. You have both now. Elena touched Vincent's ring, which had become as natural as her own skin. The community respected her authority because she'd earned it through service, rather than seized it through violence. Children who'd grown up fearing the Torrino name now participated in programs funded by his transformed legacy. Maria arrived with her children, now recovered from their kidnapping ordeal and excited about the summer camp program Elena's foundation sponsored. The kids had adapted to their aunt's unusual prominence with the resilience that characterized their generation. "Aunt Elena, are you really going to help catch bad guys in Boston?" Emma asked, having overheard adult conversations about the FBI consultation offer. "Maybe. Would that concern you?" "Not if you're making them help people instead of hurt them." Elena realized that her transformation from desperate job seeker to community leader had created ripple effects throughout her extended family. Maria's children understood justice and service in ways their suburban classmates couldn't. Having witnessed firsthand the cost of corruption and the value of courage, "Elena," Anthony said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you about the Boston situation." "What?" Walsh didn't mention that the organization they're investigating has connections to Sophia's family in Europe. Her cousins are apparently trying to establish American operations using information she provided before her death. Elena felt the familiar chill of recognition. Vincent's war against corruption hadn't ended with Tommy and Sophia's elimination. It had evolved into a broader conflict against criminal networks that adapted and survived individual defeats. So this is ongoing and this is permanent. Dad understood that fighting corruption isn't a battle you win. It's a responsibility you accept for as long as you're capable of fulfilling it. Elena looked across the harbor toward the horizon, understanding that her $50 auction purchase had committed her to a lifetime of service that would extend far beyond their local community. Vincent Torrino's final gift hadn't been just evidence of corruption. It had been the knowledge and network necessary to fight that corruption wherever it emerged. She pulled out her phone and replied to Agent Walsh's message, "When do we start?" Some responsibilities once accepted lasted forever. Elena had learned to embrace that truth with the same determination that had carried her through unemployment, threats, and the transformation of a criminal legacy into community asset. The wolf was dead, but his mission lived on in people who understood that justice required constant vigilance and occasionally required ordinary citizens to do extraordinary things.